The Burnside Expedition, as it was designated, was assembled and ready for action in early January, Annapolis being the staging area for its 13,000 troops and 80 vessels. Grouped into three divisions under brigades who had been cadets with their commander at West Point, J. G. Foster, Jesse L. Reno, John J. Park, three of my most trusted friends, he called them. The men were mostly rock-ribbed New Englanders, many of whom would be familiar with the coastal trade, and among whom would be found a goodly number of mechanics. The naval component of this task, under Rear Admiral Lewis M. Goldsborough, a big, slack-bodied regular of the type called barnacles, had no such homogeneity. In addition to 20 light craft gunboats armed with cannon salvaged from the armories of various navy yards, there was a rickety lot of 60-odd transports and supply ships, including tugs, ferries, converted barges, and flat-bottomed river steamers, a conglomerate, in sort, of whatever could be scraped together by purchasing agents combing the northern rivers and harbors for vessels rejected by agents who had come and gone before them. The only characteristic they shared was that they all drew in less than 8 feet of water, the reported high tide depth, across the bars at Hatteras Inlet, North Carolina. This was the cause of much grumbling at the outset. Seafaring men among the soldiers took one look at the shallow drift transports and shook their heads. At the worst, they had volunteered for getting shot at, not drowned, which was what they believed would happen once those tugs reached open water. Burnside answered the grumbling by taking the smallest, least seaworthy craft for the lot for his headquarters boat. Thus reassured, or anyhow reproached, the troops filled into the transports, and on the morning of the 9th, the flotilla steamed out of the harbor to rendezvous next day off Fort Monroe. On the 11th, clearing Hampton Roads, the skipper broke open their sealed orders and steered south. The near mutiny among his seagoing soldiers at the outset was only the first of Burnside's troubles. In fact, the method by which he had quelled the grumbling almost cost him his life the following night, when the fleet ran into a gale off Hatteras. The dingy little headquarters boat got into the trough of the sea and nearly floundered. As he remembered it years later, still somewhat queasy from the experience, everything not surely lashed above decks was swept overboard, while men, furniture, and crockery below decks were thrown about in the most promiscuous manner. Eventually, her steersman brought her head to, and she rode the storm out, staggering up and down the mast, high waves, to arrive next morning off Hatteras Inlet, the entrance to Pimlico Sound, where an even worse shock awaited him. The water, though there, was not 8 feet deep, as he had been told, but 6, which barred many of his vessels from a share in the expedition as effectively as if they had been sunk by enemy action. Here was where the goodly number of mechanics, familiar with the coasting trade, stood their commander in good stead. The tide running swift above the swash, they sent several of the larger ships full speed ahead to ground on the bar, and held them there with tugs and anchors, while the racing current washed the sand from under their bottoms. It was a slow process, bumping them forward length by length, but it worked. By early February, a broad 8-foot channel had been cut, and the fleet assembled safely in the Sound. On the 4th, after a conference with the flag officer, Burnside gave his brigadiers detailed instructions for the landing on Roanoke Island. Another 2-day blow delayed it, but on the morning of the 7th, a fine clear day with sunshine bright on the placid sapphire water, the fleet steamed forward in attack formation. Still suffering from the multiple pangs of pleurisy and frustration, Wise had been confined all this time at Nags Harbor, the Confederate command post on the rainy rim of Albemarle Sound, just opposite the north end of the island. He knew what was coming, and even how, though until now he had not realized the strength of the blow the Federals were aiming. Goldsborough's warships were out in front, mounting a total of 64 guns, eager to take on the 7 makeshift rebel vessels, each mounting a single 32-pound rifle. Behind the Yankee gunboats came the transports, crowded with 13,000 assault troops ready to storm ashore and try their strength against the island's fewer than 3,000 defenders. The Mosquito fleet took station in front of an uncompleted line of pilings Wise had started driving across the channel. But when the Federals roared and bore down on them, belching smoke and flame from 9-inch guns and the 100-pound rifles, they scurried back through the gap and out of range, leaving the water batteries to take up the defense. There were 2 of these, both up toward the northern end of the island, and while the warships took them under fire, the transports dropped anchor 3 miles astern and began unloading troops for the landing at Ashby's harbor, midway up the island's 10-mile length. The first boats hit the beach at 4 o'clock. All this time, the duel between the gunboats and batteries continued, with more noise and damage on either side. At sundown, the Mosquito fleet attempted a daring attack that was repulsed about as soon as it began. By midnight, all the troops were ashore. The undefended southern half of the island had been secured without the infantry firing a shot. Drenched by a chill rain, they tried to get what sleep they could before the dawn advance, knowing that tomorrow would be tougher. Down the boggy center of the island, a little more than a mile from the opposite beaches, ran a causeway. Astride this backbone of defense, the Confederates had placed a 3-gun battery supported by infantry and flanked by quicksand marshes judged impenetrable. To advance along the causeway toward those guns would be like walking up to a hardwood alley toward a bowler whose only worry was running out of balls before the advancer ran out of legs. Yet there was no other way, and the men of both armies knew it. Burnside as well as anyone, for he had been briefed for the landing by a 20-year-old contraband who had run away from his island master the week before and was thoroughly familiar with the disposition for defense. Instructing Foster to charge straight up the causeway while Reno and Park were probing the boggy flanks, Burnside put all 3 brigades into line and sent them forward as soon as the light was full. Right off, the center brigade ran into murderous head-on fire. Bowled over and pinned down, they were hugging the sandy embankment and wondering what came next. When, off to the right and left fronts, they heard simultaneous whoops of exultation. The flank brigades had made it through the knee-deep ooze and slush of the impenetrable marsh. While the rebel cannoneers tried frantically to turn their guns to meet these attacks from opposite and unexpected directions, the men along the causeway jumped up, whooping too, and joined the charge. The battery was quickly overrun. With the fall of the 3-gun battery, the island's defenses collapsed of a broken backbone. Burnside's infantry broke into the clear, taking the water batteries in reverse, while the fleet continued its booming bombardment from the channel. By mid-afternoon, the Confederates had retreated as far as they could go. Corralled on the northern tip of the island, their ammunition exhausted, they laid down their arms. Casualties had been relatively light on both sides, 264 for the attackers, 143 for the defenders. The difference came in the fruits of victory. 2,675 soldiers and 32 cannon were surrendered, losses which the South could ill afford. Best of all, from the northern point of view, Burnside had won control of North Carolina's inland sea, thereby tightening the blockade one hard twist more, opening a second front in the Virginia Army's rear, gaining access to the back door of Norfolk, and arousing the immediate apprehension of every rebel posted within gunshot of salt water. No beach was safe. This newly bred amphibious beast, like some monster out of mythology, half army, half navy, an improbable, unholy combination if there ever was one, might come splashing and roaring ashore at any point from here on down.